Hi, I'm Michael Heron. Today's lesson we're looking at a still life with line. We'll be looking at the basic makeup of objects, looking at their form and their shape, and trying to understand how we can make line into 3 dimensions. So the pencils we'll be using, I'll be starting with an F pencil, basically something that is quite light. It's a harder pencil, and we'll be working up to a 2B pencil, a little softer and a little darker, and then a 4B pencil, the darkest one I'll be using today. You'll notice that I've sharpened my pencil with a knife. That produces more exposed lead. It means you can see the point at which the pencil touches the page. The other thing we'll be using is a kneadable eraser, and that enables us to push on and take off tone. So keeping our detail, but actually taking the strength out of that graphite. When we start to look at our subject, we are starting to think about where they are in relationship to our eye line. Our eye line being how high we are in the actual room. So if we put our pencils out in front of us, we start to think of where flat is, where our eye line is. Now if I pick my cup off my subject and I bring that up to my eye line, that ellipse is very flat. As soon as that goes down below my eye line, I start to see into that. Or as soon as I go up above that, I start to see again underneath it and into it. So when we're drawing and we're seeing our subject casually put on a table, we have to think strongly about where we are in relationship to it. We need to think about how we've got our easel placed in relationship to the subject matter. What we're trying to do is draw so that we can flick our eyes between the subject and the drawing. We draw from our shoulder. We've got our elbow locked and our wrist locked. Our pencil like so. That gives us full movement in all directions. What we are trying to avoid, I guess, is writing our drawing. And that drags us or draws us in close to the page. What that produces is small pockets of drawing rather than an overall. And it also means that our forms can be completely out of shape while we're only looking at one small section of them. So it's good that we stand like so. And it means that our arm can be drawing a very nice straight line, or in fact our, like so, nice and free, or our ellipses can be like this from our bottles and forms. We can join them nice and freely like this. It's a good way of starting to think about drawing. So when we start, we're drawing on our side, and this produces a very soft line. And that softness comes from the side of the lead, which is why we have to keep cutting the lead with a blade to expose as much lead as possible, versus then the tip of the pencil, which produces the detail or the sharper lines. So the sharpest lines on any form, the clearest lines, the most definite, are the ones in front, which means we're starting to draw from the back and we're drawing forward. We're drawing our form forward by sharpening. So in our simple line drawing, it's not until we add the shadow that we start seeing the three-dimensional context. This supports the cup form. We see it dramatically when we start to draw the orange. If I draw it simply, is a flat circle. In fact, it's a three-dimensional object. But if I just draw the outline, if we just simply look at outline, there's no supporting context to make it three-dimensional. As soon as I add its accompanying shadow, then there's more claim for volume. And as soon as I add a little more emphasis, in this case to the bottom part of the circle, it starts getting a little more three-dimensional. If I look closer, there might be some darkness up there. If I push the 4B pencil a little harder, then we start getting a little more weight underneath it. So these shadows or these darker marks glue the forms down to the table. So our objective is to try and make a three-dimensional voluminous drawing on a two-dimensional flat page. That means you may bring around your pencil to do a little bit of detail. So this, in a line sense, without any supporting shading or hatching, gives us quite a strong three-dimensional form for a round orange. If I move to our apple, what I'd suggest would be to draw something of a generic round form to start with, and then start to see, well, actually there are some angles going on there, some straights. The apple has a little more detail on it than the orange. There's a little bit more to get in close and draw and observe. In this situation, we've got stem to draw, which means it's going to draw me in a little closer. But what's quite good is if we start from this overview, and there's our shadow again, and don't get drawn into details too early, we get a good shape. On top of this line drawing, we can start placing shading, tone, hatching, obviously more detail if there's detail to be drawn. What we're trying to do is see the overall clearly, and then get in close and start to think what the exact idea of it is, what the exact detail might be. What we see first is a cup minus its handle. We see its basic shape. On top of this basic shape, we start adding some detail. So in this case, we're starting to think of the handle being an addition to our original cylindrical form. Now you're noticing that I'm using my arm in such a way. The arc of my wrist starts being important there. Or I'm starting to lock my arm, and if it's a bigger curve, starting to shape that from my shoulder. So it's important that we try and use our arm and the way our body is made to draw some of these things, so our actual kind of mechanics really help us get down these lines nice and freshly. As soon as we draw this softly, we start looking closer and we start seeing that leading edge being darker, so we start enforcing that. If I've gone too dark on any point of this, your kneadable eraser is a great tool. One of its advantages is that you can push it on and take it off. It maintains the detail you drew, but it lightens it. So instead of thinking this is about scrubbing out information because I got it all completely wrong, it means then you can just gently push on and lighten entire forms with the idea that you might draw back into it. If all goes to plan, your lighter marks when you first started don't need to be erased. The darker ones, when they're drawn in nice and strong, overpower those initial light marks. Turning over a new page, we're going to try a couple more objects in our still life. The bottle presents a slightly more difficult prospect of drawing. We'll be drawing the cylinder we drew with the cup, plus the shoulders of the bottle and the neck. This presents a bigger challenge, but let's just see how we can do it. If we start, we draw a vertical line. A light, very light vertical line. This is where we draw our bottle. So our ellipses start to be drawn with the line, keeping them steady so that they're above each other. If I link them together, we can make sure that they're the same size. If we got strongly into this, we could actually measure. But I'm trying to develop your eye to see that you can see halfway, and that the halfway from there to there is the same from there to there. Also, we're seeing our cylinder above the neck of our bottle, above the body of our bottle, and again we can join the two of those together. Now at this point, if we've made a mistake, we can increase the length of the bottle. We can make it a longer bottle, which is why starting in a very light fashion is a very strategic way to start, because it enables us to correct mistakes as we go. Now when I'm drawing these spots, these are the areas we have to join up. So traditionally, and when we first start drawing, I guess, we start to draw down, we go around, and the mistake is that we're trying to link up both of these sides independently of each other by circumnavigating our form. However, if we draw or we break our bottle down into its constituent parts, these two cylinders, and then try and join those together with a nice fresh arc, then we effectively get around the idea that this side doesn't look like that side. The eternal problem of drawing bottles or forms that are, of course, axial, that have a centre line.